Disney recently released a new limited edition Legacy Lightsaber hilt set. We have Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati. These are characters from the Ahsoka series. And what makes these hilts stand out is they do something no other lightsaber from Galaxy's Edge has ever done before. These lightsabers ignite orange. We've never had an orange lightsaber before, and now we have two. This Legacy lightsaber hilt set comes with their own blades. And the point of this video is not to review the hilts themselves. I want to look at the blades and why we need a blade that is specific for these hilts. The first question is, what kind of compatibility is there with the regular Galaxy's Edge blade? And if we look at them, they are exactly the same. They fit the same, they are designed the same screws, same size, same everything. The Baylan Shin blades will fit any other Legacy hilt or a Savvy's Workshop hilt, and vice versa. A regular Galaxy's Edge lightsaber blade will fit a Shin or Baylan hilt. But if you try to use a regular blade, you're going to notice it doesn't really do anything. The blade doesn't light up. The hilt thinks it's on. The hilt's reacting. But the blade isn't doing anything. It's only with the specialized blade that is designed for these hilts that you will get an orange blade. So what if we try the opposite? What if we take a regular Galaxy's Edge hilt like the Savvy's Workshop hilt? I've just put in a purple crystal. I'm going to take the Baylan Shin blade and put that in. Does it work? Yeah, absolutely works. I get a purple blade. Alright, so it works with a purple kyber crystal, but I can hear you immediately asking, well, wait a minute, isn't there a special number that you can reprogram kyber crystals with to make the Savvy's Workshop hilt ignite orange? And yeah, there is. And you can see the orange light glowing inside the Savvy's Workshop chassis, indicating that it has recognized this as an orange crystal. So, will the Baylan Skoll Shin Hati blades ignite orange? Well, let's find out. No, they ignite yellow. They ignite the same color that a regular blade would ignite. What appears to be happening is the programming for a regular blade has gone into the specialized blades, and then they've added something extra into that code to allow an orange blade for the Baylan and Shin hilts. So to sum things up then, a regular Galaxy's Edge blade will be recognized by a Shin or Baylan hilt, but it won't ignite. A Shin or Baylan blade will work with a Savvy's Workshop chassis. It will work with other Legacy hilts. The two, while physically compatible, are not functionally compatible in that the new hilts do not produce an orange blade with the old blades. Only with these new blades do the new hilts produce an orange blade. And if you have a kyber crystal that you've programmed to be an orange kyber crystal, it does not work with the Baylan and Shin blades. It ignites yellow, just like a regular blade would. If all you have are questions about whether original Galaxy's Edge blades are compatible with these new hilts, whether the new blades offer new functionality for a Savvy's Workshop hilt or other Legacy hilts, etc., all that stuff has been answered. If that's all you're interested in, great. You don't have to worry about the rest of this video. But the video isn't going to end, because now I need to do a deep dive into how this hilt works. I have a couple of projects on Github for blade controllers. One is for a Neopixel blade. The other one is for the stock blade. And Both of those need to be updated with the correct orange for these hilts. Now, it's not just a regular orange, it's sort of a more red orange than what I would normally call orange, like a blood red orange. So I need to look at the exact timings of what the blade is doing to generate that orange. I need to look at how much red and how much green are being used to make that deeper reddish orange color. Also, legacy hilts have different timings. When you turn a legacy hilt off, different hilts will take different amounts of time for their blade to extinguish. And I can approximate it, but I'd like to have a solid timing value so that way I could put that into my code. So I want to see the color. I want to see the clash color when the hilt stops suddenly and there's a crackling noise and the blade flashes a different color. What color? To my eyes, it was yellow, but maybe it's not yellow. Maybe my eyes are playing tricks on me. I can see what color that clash is, what color the blade is. I can see the command being sent from the hilt to the blade and the timings by hooking up the blade to a logic analyzer. Basically, it's just a graph of the voltage on various points within the blade, and instead of giving you an analog value, which would be whatever the voltage really is, it gives you either a high or a low, a 1 or a 0, a digital level of whatever line is being monitored by the logic analyzer. So that's what I want to do. I'm going to hook the blade up to that. I'm going to have to solder a bunch of wires to the blade's electronics and figure out a way to rig it so that way I can plug the blade into the hilt or get the data from the hilt to the blade so I can see it all in action. So that is what I am going to do now. I'm going to figure out that setup, and we'll open up a logic analyzer and we'll see for ourselves the exact color, the clash color, the timings, all of that. We'll get all of those dirty details by hooking that blade up to a logic analyzer. Alright, let's dig into the blade and see what's inside. Okay, I already have some idea here. It's a green PCB. There was some set that came with its own blade, and that blade was green as well. You haven't been glued together. I refuse to believe that they would glue you together. I don't think it's been glued together. I think it's just it's very tightly packed together. It's a press fit, and the press fit's particularly tight. Come on, you're almost there. If you do this, be very careful. You don't want to break it, but there we go. Okay, so let's take a look here. It looks like a 3.3 volt regulator. That's going to provide power over to the microcontroller. And this is going to be a voltage regulator. And in combination with this inductor, that provides the 5 volts that drives the LEDs. This is that big chunky diode on the red line. Same as we see in the stock blades. 4 segment drivers here, those transistors, 3 color drivers here, those 3 transistors. The layout is just about the same. It's got this little extension on the PCB here. Again, I forget what legacy I saw this in before. I should look that up real quick. It was the Mace Windu set that I saw the same blade controller. When the Mace Windu set came out, which was like, 3-4 years ago, they wouldn't even had these hilts in mind. So I think they've just changed the code. Oh, I'm going to have to go dig out the stupid Mace Windu set now, aren't I? If I can find the other blade that has this same thing on it from a previous set, I'll check it to see if it's got the orange color. It almost certainly doesn't. And now I'm going to attach wires to the blade controller so that I can monitor the points that I'm attaching these wires to with a logic analyzer. These first 4 wires are the power rails that go to the 4 different segments of the blade. This will allow us to see the ignition and extinguish sequences when the blade is turned on and off. These next 3 wires are to the gates of the transistors that control the color. That's the red transistor. The second transistor here is the green transistor. Then the third one will be the blue transistor. This will allow us to see how the different colors are being mixed together to provide the different colors that the blade produces, specifically that blood orange red. This next wire is going to the data line. This is where the commands from the hilt come into the blade, so we can see exactly what commands are being sent. And the last wire is the ground wire that provides a reference for the voltage levels that we'll be monitoring on all the other wires. And there it is. There is the blade controller wired up, ready to be analyzed with the logic analyzer. The logic analyzer that I'm using is this thing here, the data logic analyzer. I bought this thing off eBay. I think it cost like $6 or $7. I'm just using the cheapest thing I could find because I want to use tools here that are not expensive, something that you could do yourself without having to invest a lot of money. There are other logic analyzers that can range in hundreds to even thousands of dollars, but this little $6 job is all we really need. So I've plugged one end into the USB connection that's going into my computer, and on the other end here, I'm going to connect some wires that I'll then clip to the wires that we soldered to the blade controller earlier. With those wires hooked up to the logic analyzer, there is one more piece of connection that we need to make. We need to connect the blade to the hilt. To help make that connection, I'm going to use this. It's a 3D printed blade connector with a PCB on the bottom of it that's going to connect to the hilt, and it's going to take those power and data and ground lines from the hilt up to those 3 wires that I can now connect to the blade somehow. To connect that blade connector to the blade, I'm going to use this PCB that I made a few years ago. It's got 3 pogo pins on it, and it allows me to connect data, ground, and power to it, and then press it against the base of the blade connector to deliver the power, ground, and data to the blade. The blade connector has been hooked up to that PCB, but now I need to hold it against the blade connector somehow. And I could hold it there with my finger, but it's not going to be very useful because I'm going to have to use other hands to start the logic analyzer while controlling the hilt, and it's not going to work. So I need some way of holding these two things together, and rather than coming up with something clever, I'm just going to use some tape. It's not the prettiest thing in the world, but it's going to get the job done. But I want to test it first before I hook it up to the Shin hilt. So what I'm going to do here is use my Savvy's hilt that I use to test everything with. And it was already in the on position, and you saw the blade ignites. So it works. We have a good connection, data, power, and ground from the hilt to the blade via this mess of wires and tape that I've put together. So now that we know it works, it's time to put it to the test. Welcome to my desktop. I have PulseView running here. I have already connected the logic analyzer, and it has detected it. And what I can do now is configure how many samples I want to take, and we'll just say 1 gig of samples for now at, let's go with 16 megahertz. So now I'm going to do a test run. I'm going to start this by clicking run, and then I'm going to plug in my Savvy's hilt and turn it on and off, and we'll see what we see. So here we go. Capture failed. That's brilliant. As I was saying, we'll hit run, and it's recording data. The tape isn't holding as well as I had hoped. Who could have seen this one coming? Now let's try this again. I think it doesn't like running at 16 megahertz, so we're going to drop it down to 8. We'll see what happens here. Hit run. There we go. Now we got stuff happening. Yeah, look at that. This is a Savvy's Workshop hilt. It's got an orange crystal in it. So if we zoom in here, we can see this bottom line here. This is the data line. This is the command coming into the hilt. You can see there's this period of it goes low and then high and then low. That is how the hilt tells the blade a command is coming. After that preamble, 8 bits get transmitted. And the way to think of this is there's a high and then there's a low. Whichever one is longer tells you the value. So we have a 0, a 0, a 1, a 0. So that's, if we're thinking of this in as representing 1 byte in hexadecimal, that would be a 2 for the first number in hexadecimal, or 32 in decimal. And then the next one is 0, 0 is, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 0, 1, 0. So that'd be 2, 2. So what does that mean? That is a fine question. On the Galaxy's Edge research spreadsheet, where I keep all of the information that I find about these devices, I have a tab specifically for the communications between the hilt and the blade. And if we scroll down a little bit here, we have a command table. Now, the way commands are sent to the blade from the hilt is it's 1 byte of data, 8 bits. The upper 4 bits represent the command. The lower 4 bits represent an optional value. So the upper 4 bits, remember, if we go back and look once again here, we have a 0, 0, 1, 0. So we have a value of 2 here. That's a value of 2 in binary. Come back to the spreadsheet. A command of 2 animates the blade powering on. And specifically, it's used for Savvy's Workshop hilts. So that is the note there. So we saw an ignite. The second, or the lower 4 bits of data. We go back over here. We can see a 0, 0, 1, 0. That is also a 2. And if we scroll down further, we have our color table here. And we see a 2. Should be orange if orange was a thing, but in reality, stock blades will ignite yellow, and so I have that in parentheses here. So we see a command to ignite the blade orange here from a Savvy's hilt. That lines up with the commands that I have here in the spreadsheet. And now if we look further here, we can see the different segments. These first 4 lines are supposed to represent the blade turning on. And I suspect I've got some wires hooked up and they're touching. Not a big deal. We'll go double check those wires. And then we have the red, green, and blue lines here. Here, let me rename these. I've renamed the data channels here so we understand what each represents. Segment 1, 2, 3, and 4, the red, green, and blue channels, and our data line. And we can see right away that when it starts to ignite, the red, green, and blue lines, the blue stays flat, red and green is being pulsed on and off. That lets it control the brightness of the colors. I want to see what the PWM rate is for those. So if I go into decoders here and I search for PWM, and we can add that. I'm going to add 3. This will be red PWM, and the data line is going to be the red channel. This will be the green PWM. You get the idea. And now with my PWM decoders set up, we can see we are running at a slightly higher PWM for red versus blue. Or green, I should say, 60% versus 62%. That's kind of interesting, but that gives you some insight into how the color is being generated. But I don't like the way the segment data looks. You see how it's the same all the way across, and I don't think it should be. Actually, I had to rewire this a little bit. In my first attempts at recording some data, I had garbage on the 4 power lines for the segments. And the reason that was happening is because the power lines are left floating when the blade is off, and I needed to pull them to ground. So I brought in this breadboard here. The power lines are going from the blade controller to the breadboard, and then I'm pulling those lines to ground via 10K resistors. This isn't a great setup. There's going to be a bunch of noise and other garbage that's going to get created because of this, but we'll get a clean enough signal in the logic analyzer that we'll be able to see what's going on. So again, not the best solution, but it's enough that it's going to work. We have the hilt hooked up. We have all the blade segments being pulled to ground. This should give us good data on the segments. So let's try it out. I'm going to hit run and then ignite the blade. Looks like we're getting good data. Turn that off, stop the recording, and let's take a look at the data. So we can see the first blade is turning on, and we can see it's being pulse width modulated at about 50%. So the first segment turns on at about 50% brightness, and then after a little while it goes full on. When that first segment turns full on, the second segment starts to come on at 50% brightness, and the pattern continues with the third segment, but when the third segment goes to turn full on, the fourth segment turns full on as well. The fourth segment, the end or tip segment of your lightsaber blade, never fades in, it just pops right on. And it's probably something nobody ever notices, but you can see it in the data, and the next time you turn on your lightsaber, look at that tip. It never fades in, it just pops right in at full brightness. This is the command that tells that blade to ignite orange, and this has been something of a question, so we should probably take a look at it. Now remember, we have this preamble here of this low, high, low section here, and maybe I'll make this channel a little bit bigger so we can see exactly what's going on. We have our low, high, low period here, and then we have the actual ignite command. And here we are in the world of MS Paint, and what I am going to do now is start drawing lines so we can clearly see where our bits are. So I've divided up this ignite command into 8 sections, 8 bits, so we can more clearly understand what's going on here. This first section, we have a longer low period than a high period, so that is going to be a 0. And the same for the next section. And this third section has a longer high period, so that's going to be a 1. And then the same for the fourth section, a longer high period, so that's a 1. And then another 1, and then a 0, and then a 1, and then a 0. So we can see here we have an 8-bit value here. The first 4 bits, which represent the command, is the value 3 in binary. Our most significant bit is on the left, the least significant is on the right. So in binary we have a 1 in the 1's position and a 1 in the 2's position, so we add that up. 1 plus 2 is 3. We have a 3 for the command. And then for the value, we have a 1 in the 8's position and a 1 in the 2's position. Add those up, we get 10. So we have a value, a command in hexadecimal now represented as 3A, or command 3 value 10, however you want to word it. And what's kind of interesting here is if you notice on this last bit of the command, the blade starts turning on as soon as the high period goes low. It already knows at this point that it's going to be a 0 because the high period was short compared to everything else. So it can start processing immediately. It's kind of a little interesting insight into how the code works. The code must be looking at just the length of the high period to determine what the bit value is. So command 3 value 10. What does that mean? Well, we go back to that spreadsheet. And we can see that a command of 3 is a legacy ignite command. So we know that the Shin and Baylan hilts are using a legacy ignite command. And the value of 10 for a legacy used to be what these others are, which is white. And I put those in parentheses because those last 6 values for the legacy ignite command, those were unused. In the past, when I had analyzed the blades, I could see the blades were trying to ignite. The color channels were being modulated to produce a white color, but the segments for the blades weren't turning on. So I considered the last 6 positions to be white, but really they are unused. They weren't programmed to be used in regular Galaxy's Edge blades. So what's happened here is they've taken the first unused position in that legacy color table, and they've just put orange in there. And now we have a hilt that's using that color for the legacy ignite command. And it does mean there are 5 other unused colors, but in order for those to be used, you have to update the programming in the blade, and so any changes to this would require another new or specialized blade for just whatever future legacy hilt comes out that uses a new or unique color. And if you're wondering if the Baylan and Shin blades have those other 5 spots programmed with new colors, I can tell you they don't. I've already tested all of them. A little bit of a disappointment, but at least we know that the only changes here are the addition of this orange color to the legacy color table, and that's it. Everything else, those Baylan and Shin blades are the same as every other Galaxy's Edge blade. Now, if we look at the red and green channels, those are being pulse width modulated, and we can see how that orange color is being produced. We can see the red channel has a 70% duty cycle, which means that the red channel is on 70% of the time, or we're getting 70% of the red brightness, and that the green channel is being modulated at about 10%. So we're getting about 10% of the green. So 70% to 10%, that produces the deep blood red orange color that these blades are using with the Shin and Baylan hilts. One other blade mechanic I want to point out is this command here. You notice it comes through and then the blade shuts down, but it doesn't shut down immediately. And this gap between the shutdown command and when the animation of the blade turning off starts will vary between Savvy's workshop colors and different legacy hilts. So this is a piece of information I'll need to know when updating my blade controller code for this particular hilt. So first we can come in here and look at the command itself. We can see it's a 0, 1, 0, 1. So that's a 5 in binary. And then 1, 0, 1, 0. That's an A or 10 in binary. We come over here. The 5 command is animate the blade turning off, which is what we expect. And A is the color, which is that orange color that these new blades produce. One thing I don't have here in the data is the clash. I know when I manually clash the blade, it turns yellow briefly, so I put down yellow as the color, but maybe we could confirm that real quick. So I'm going to run the data collection one more time. Alright, that looks like we've got some clashes in there. You can see exactly where they are because the red and green channels both go to 100% brightness. So that confirms that when the clash command comes in, we've got full yellow. And we can decode the clash command. We've got a 1, 1, 0, 0. That is 8 and 4. That's 12. That's hexadecimal C. So if we go back into the command list here, C, nope, that's the color. Here we are, C, flash the blade to indicate it hit something else. So now we know that the clash command came through. We saw that there was no additional value passed with it. Some of these commands don't take an additional value, so they just send a 0. So yeah, we see a clash command come through, and then the blade temporarily turns into a full yellow blade, and then turns off back into an orange color. So now we can do some measurements here. We can see how long, roughly, is that a yellow blade, and we can see it's roughly 30 milliseconds, and then it kicks off, goes back to the regular color. So now let's go back over here to the shutdown command. Well, how long between the shutdown command coming through and the blade turning off or starting to turn off. And we can see that for this, we have about 175 milliseconds between the command coming in and the blade starting to turn off. So that delay is something I have to incorporate into my code, so that way the animation of the extinguish and the sound produced by the hilt all line up, so you don't have a blade that's completely off and the hilt is still making noise. And this is the kind of data collection that I have to do for all the different blade options that are possible, so that way I can put that into my code, so that way the extinguish lines up with the sound from the hilt. Now, you might be asking, well, do you own all the legacy hilts then to get all of those timings? And no, I don't, but I don't need that. As you saw, there are only 16 colors. We're not going by hilt, we're going by color. So there's 2 ignite commands, 2 extinguish commands. There's a Savvy's extinguish and a legacy hilt extinguish. Each one can have one of 16 colors passed to it. So really, I only need to send 32 different commands to the blade and see how it turns off each of those 32 different times and measure that and put that into a big database somewhere. Do I have it in here somewhere? Yes, I do. Here it is on the lightsaber blade hardware in operation. We scroll down a little bit and I have the extinguish delay and the actual extinguish. And now we can see, if we come down to A, goes across here. And we can fill in these values as well. The blade color we now know is orange. And we need to get the ignition first. And we don't need to be precise, it's fine. 260 milliseconds. We'll call it 265. And then the extinguish delay time. You can see that that is roughly 176. We'll call that 175. And the extinguish time itself looks to be about 450 milliseconds. So now we have updated ignition and extinguish times for the Baylan Skoll Shin Hati legacy hilts. And you can see on this lightsaber blade hardware and operation section, I actually have older captures using different software of the same thing, so you can get an idea of exactly what I'm talking about. It talks about how blades turn off, how some of them extinguish in like 33, 66%, and 100% PWM as it turns off. As I record these notes, I put them into this spreadsheet, try to organize it a little bit, but it's just me info dumping into a place that I can refer back to later on. And that's what this spreadsheet is all about. This is why it exists. And some people find it useful, and I'm glad for that. So the research spreadsheet has been updated, and so has the code for my custom blade controller. Here is a Galaxy's Edge lightsaber blade that I've installed one of my blade controllers into. The dip switch settings here are set so that it will behave like a stock blade, and I've reprogrammed it with the latest version of the firmware that includes support for the Baylan and Shin hilts. And so we can now see that in action. There is the orange blade. So this and my Neopixel blade controller code, both of which are on GitHub, have both been updated to support these new legacy hilts. There's one other thing I want to show you and talk about quickly. You already know part of it. This is my hilt simulator. I got this little PCB with the 3 pogo pins that can be pressed against the base of a blade, and we can use this to send commands into the blade without a hilt. Now the code on here is set up in such a way that it starts out at like the first color value for like a Savvy's ignite command. Press it, it sends it, it ignites the blade, clashes a couple of times, turns it off, and then it waits, and then until you press the button again. And when you press the button a second time, it increments the color by 1. And it goes through all 16 possible colors for a Savvy's hilt, and then it goes on to the legacy ignite command, and we'll go through those 16 color options as well. So that's how I know what all 32 possible color options are. So that's about all I wanted to cover. If you have any questions about how the blade works or the hilt or anything like that, feel free to leave a comment. And I usually watch the comments and respond to most of them, the ones that I see. Until the next video, good luck and have fun.